There's a particular kind of loneliness that adults rarely talk about. Not the loneliness of having no one around, but the loneliness of having people around and still feeling like you're living life from behind a thick piece of glass. You move through your day holding conversations, making decisions, sending messages, being fine. You function. You even laugh, and people might think you're put together, responsible. But you know there's a hollowness underneath, a quiet, private ache you never say out loud. Because your loneliness isn't loud, it doesn't cry out or collapse. It sits in the corner of your chest, quiet and patient, like a shadow you've carried for so long that you've learned to walk around it. What's most confusing is this. You don't want to be alone, but you don't know how not to be alone. Connection feels necessary, but vulnerability feels dangerous. You crave closeness, but closeness feels like exposure. You want someone to notice you, but you panic when someone tries to get too close. And so you end up living in a kind of emotional twilight, never entirely alone, never fully known. This is the paradox that defines the lonely adult. The very skills that protected you once, independence, self-reliance, emotional walls, are now the same things that quietly sabotage your ability to feel seen, held, or understood. You learn to survive by needing nothing, and now you suffer because you cannot ask for anything. Not help, not care, not softness, not presence, not even love, not in a way that feels safe. And that's the hidden pain. Not that others don't choose you, but that you don't know how to let yourself be chosen. So today, we're going to explore this archetype, the lonely adult who grew up mastering self-containment. Not to shame them, not to fix them, but to finally put words to a grief they've carried in silence. Definition and psychological authority. To understand the lonely adult, we have to understand the origin of emotional self-containment. This is not simply a preference for solitude. It is not introversion. It is not being independent. This is a survival adaptation rooted in the earliest wiring of the nervous system. 3 psychological concepts define this archetype. 1. Avoidant attachment, the safety in distance. Avoidant attachment does not mean you don't feel. It means you were conditioned to hide what you feel. As a child, when emotional needs were met with inconsistency, overwhelm, criticism, or absence, your brain learned, needing others is unsafe, relying on myself is safer. And so you stopped reaching out, not because you didn't want comfort, but because comfort felt unreliable. Distance became security. Self-sufficiency became armor. 2. Emotional minimization, the shrinking of the inner voice. This is when a child learns that their emotions take up too much space. In a stressed home, in a chaotic environment, or in front of emotionally unavailable caregivers, you shrink your needs to survive. You shrink your voice to keep the peace. You shrink your emotional presence to avoid rejection or judgment. But the cost of that shrinking is profound. You grow up unable to expand into connection. 3. The default mode, network and hyperindependence. The default mode network, DMN, is the part of the brain activated during self-reflection, imagination, and internal narrative. Lonely adults often have a highly active DMN, not due to creativity alone, but because they've spent their whole lives in their own heads. When you grow up providing emotional regulation for yourself, your inner world becomes both, your home and your isolation chamber. Hyperindependence is not a personality trait. It is a nervous system adaptation. You unconsciously tell yourself, "I'll handle it. It's fine. I don't need help. I don't want to be a burden. I'll figure it out alone." But the brain doesn't forget what it never received. It only learns to stop expecting it. And that is how loneliness becomes a default mode, not because you chose it, but because you adapted to it. The emotional cost and philosophical weight. The emotional cost of this adaptation is heavy and often invisible. Lonely adults carry what I call inaccessible longing, a desire for connection that feels out of reach even when someone is right in front of them. You feel the ache and the longing, but you can't reach out for it. It's like living behind a glass wall. You see connection happening on the other side. You want to touch it, but the moment you move forward, something in you freezes. Why? Because connection isn't just desire, it's exposure. And exposure threatens the younger version of you who learned that emotional visibility leads to pain. Philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once said, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom." For the lonely adult, intimacy is the dizziness of possibility of being hurt, being rejected, being fully seen. So you choose distance, not because you want to be alone, but because closeness feels like danger disguised as warmth. This leads to a unique kind of grief, the grief of a life half-lived. You go to sleep with thoughts you never share. You endure burdens you never divide. You carry memories you never speak out loud. Your life becomes a museum of unexpressed emotions. And the saddest part? Most lonely adults are so used to their own pain that they can't even identify it as pain. They think it's personality, preference, or just habits. But underneath it all, it's a story. A very old story. A story about a child who learned to survive by disappearing into themselves. Adult manifestation and unlearning, loneliness in adulthood doesn't show up as being alone. It shows up as patterns, subtle, painful, predictable patterns. If you are this archetype, you might recognize yourself in the following. 1. You struggle to ask for help. Even when you're overwhelmed, you keep saying, "I got it." Because help feels like vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like risk. 2. You feel guilty for having needs. If someone asks how you're doing, you say, "I'm fine," before you even think. You minimize, shrink, soften your truth. Because somewhere deep down, you believe your needs are too much. 3. You feel emotionally disconnected even in relationships. You can be dating someone, living with someone, sharing a bed with someone, and still feel alone. Because physical proximity doesn't erase emotional distance. 4. You suppress your emotions until they leak out. You don't explode, you don't break down, but your emotions spill out sideways in overthinking, withdrawal, irritability, or numbness. 5. You choose people who require nothing from you. People who don't ask questions, don't probe, people who don't get too close, because closeness demands openness, and openness feels like exposure. 6. You're good at being there for others, but terrible at letting others be there for you. You become the listener, the supporter, the steady one. You become the safe place for others, even though you have no safe place of your own. These behaviors are not your personality. They are coping strategies, remnants of a child who learned emotional self-protection too early. And to change these patterns, the first step is not action, but witnessing. You must learn to see your loneliness not as failure, not as weakness, not as isolation, but as a wound that deserves compassion, because unlearning begins when you stop gaslighting yourself for wanting connection. Healing loneliness is not about becoming extroverted, nor is it about forcing yourself to socialize or pretending you don't fear intimacy. Healing is about relearning emotional trust, slowly, softly, gently. Here are the pillars of healing for the self-contained adult. 1. Inner child reparenting. Speak to the younger version of yourself who learned to hide. Instead of saying, "Stop being needy," you learn to say, "I'm here now, I'm listening." You build safety from the inside outward. 2. Practicing small vulnerabilities. Neither grand confessions nor emotional dumps. Small openings. "I'm tired today. I need a break. Can you help me with this? I feel overwhelmed." These tiny cracks in the armor let connection flow in. 3. Choosing softness over strength. Your strength is not in how much you can carry alone. Your strength is in your ability to let others carry a little with you. 4. Shadow work and emotional visibility. You confront the parts of yourself you've disowned, the needy self, the tender self, the longing self. You learn that emotional needs are not flaws, but signals that your humanity is intact. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." For the lonely adult, becoming who you truly are means removing the armor you didn't choose and returning to the version of yourself who once believed connection was possible, not by force, not by sudden transformation, but by choosing every day to take one step closer to visibility. You don't need to be fixed. You don't need to become louder or warmer or more open than you are. You only need to become whole. Whole enough to let yourself be seen. Whole enough to let yourself be held. Whole enough to trust that connection is not a threat, but a home you deserve to return to. If this spoke to you, share it. Someone you know is carrying the same quiet loneliness. And if you want more videos like this, more deep dives into hidden psychology, trauma, and the inner world, subscribe and stay.